And we could see some people rolling in. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Take a couple seconds before we do the official introduction. All right, Christy, we're looking good. Let's get going. Let's get going. So, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Matic Digital and Customer Success Summit. You're currently watching from Resistance to Readiness, helping customers win through your digital transformation. I'm excited to introduce our speaker, and as I introduce them, I'm going to have them answer our icebreaker question, which is, what is your biggest digital addiction? We talked about it before backstage. I think it'll be pretty great to hear Christy say it. But without further ado, everybody, this is Christy Felteruso, Chief Customer Officer at Client Success. Christy, thank you for being with us today. Take us away.
Thank you so much. All right, so my current digital addiction, which I feel like everyone would anticipate, anybody who knows me would anticipate that I'm going to say LinkedIn, because that would be an easy and obvious one. But my actual digital addiction is TikTok. And so I think the fun conversation we were having about this digital addiction is the content that I'm actually consuming on TikTok, on my FYP page, which is, if you're familiar with TikTok, it's your For You page, is all like the young girls, like 25 to 35, which that is much younger than me, teaching me how to do my hair, my makeup, how to style my clothes, how to build a capsule wardrobe. So I am obsessed with this digital content from the younger generations, trying to keep me relevant and hip so I don't feel like the elder millennial mom. So that is my preferred content. Cannot get enough of it. I just like, I'm in an addictive scroll all the time. So I'm so grateful for those girls for keeping me young and relevant. So for today, though, as we shift gears, speaking of relevance, we're going to talk about how do we shift gears for our customers and help them go from this state of resistance to readiness when we think about digital transformation. So this is something that is near and dear to my heart because for my career, just to give you a little context on me before I jump right in, if you're not familiar with me or my background, first, thank you guys for making the time to join me today. My name is Christy Falteruso. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Client Success. I have actually spent the past 13 years in customer success and have come up through 5 different organizations, leading, scaling, and transforming organizations in different ways. And some of the experiences I've had is actually going from what felt like everyone's model of customer success was this very bespoke white glove experience that we wanted all of our customers to have, to this transformational state of how do we use technology and scaled models to actually help influence and educate and enable and empower our customers. And so for me personally, I've had to work with really large enterprises and even some really big mid-market brands going through a transformational journey of basically saying, hey, by the way, all these people that you were engaging with and all these resources that you had that were so tailored to you, we're actually going to scale back on that. And now you're going to get some things that feel a little bit more generic and a little less personalized, or you're going to get things that are meant for everybody, not just you. And gosh, I got to tell you, like the shock that I think a lot of our customers had going through that initially was really difficult to navigate. So I'm going to share a little bit of my learnings and my journey and what's worked and what didn't work through the lens of leading through this change. So hopefully this resonates with you all. Maybe it's something you guys are navigating right now. Hopefully it's not as challenging as it once was, because I feel like people are just becoming more accustomed to this as being the norm. So let's jump right in. When we think about this, I think it's important for us to just set the stage here. This is not just a change in our operating models, right? This isn't really about how we're upgrading our systems and our processes. This is a mindset shift. And so when we think about this, there are so many different elements to make this successful, but we've got to be considering it through the lens of people, process, and technology. That will never not be the case, right? We've got to get people on board, not only from a practical standpoint of how is this going to work in our day to day and how are we going to get customers on board with this, but like human to human understanding, how are people going to feel about the changes that we're making? Now, one of the things that I've come to learn along the way is that it's never the change that is the problem, right? Yes, people are resistant to change and nobody feels like change is super comfortable. I get that. But there is really an underpinning behind why they feel so uncomfortable with change. Now, listen, I'm still a pen and paper girl. you cannot get me to manage my to-do list digitally. I just can't. I have tried, and I'm not resistant to change, but I just can't get it to work as part of my day-to-day. So it's not always the change itself, right? It could be a whole bunch of things. But when we really start to think about why our customers might be resistant to some of these changes, what we're finding is that it's the consideration of loss. Our customers feel like they're losing something. And that is really emotional, right? Because they feel like they're getting less than they were getting before. And that's what we want to address with this kind of change management approach. So, one, you're hearing things like, well, we've always done it this way, and I've always had this level of support, and I've always had a designated or dedicated CSM, and this person was there and they were guiding me, or I've had an account team of people, or when I had a problem, I was able to hop on a call with somebody and triage it, or if I needed to get onboarding support because I just hired 5 new people, my CSM would come on and do that. Well, now it's a little different, right? Maybe we have, you're going to go and log into a portal and there's recordings or there's articles or things that you're going to read, or maybe there's these webinars that you're going to participate in. I've even seen onboarding done at scale, right? So, like the things that were the way they were are evolving, right? So it's no longer this, we've always done it this way. This feels like more work. Now, this is something else, right? Like, oh, well, it's not as easy as it was for me once. And that's a big consideration because ideally, we don't want to create more work or more burden on our customers. And I've seen so many programs, and I got to tell you, there is not an increase of burden on the customers, but it feels that way to them. And the thing that we need to consider is that perception is reality. And so this is something we have to address because regardless of whether or not the actual work is increasing or shifting or changing or the burden is shifting gears, because they believe it is, we have to address that because their perception is their reality. Well, I wasn't included in this decision. This is a big one for me. So I'm a big advocate of the fact that I feel like change should happen with people, not to them. Whether it's your employees, your customers, it doesn't matter. People want to be part of change. They want to feel like they had a say, right? Imagine your boss showing up one day and saying, like, well, here's your new job. And you didn't have a say in that, right? Like you didn't get to say, well, this isn't the work that I want to do, or this isn't part of how I envision my career path, or I don't have the skills to do that, or frankly, I just don't want to do that. People want to feel like they're part of the decision making process. So, how do you bring your customers along in that journey? And then lastly, there's this concept of like, well, I'm just getting less. And this goes back to my initial statement of like, loss is the big resistor. I'm getting less support. I'm getting less than I was getting before. So I'm paying the same amount, or heck, we know this, prices go up all the time. It's part of it. So I'm paying more maybe, and I'm getting less. We don't want this to feel this way for any of our customers, right? They shouldn't be resistant to, we've always done it this way. It shouldn't feel like more work to them. They shouldn't feel like this is a decision that's being made for them. And they shouldn't feel like they're getting less. Now, there are ways to address all these, even if there are bits of truth here. It shouldn't feel that way to them. And then there are ways that we can address this very thoughtfully. So when I would think about this, right, this isn't to me, this isn't a CS issue, it is a human issue. And this is where I think the best organizations get it right. And the organizations that we see struggle with this is because they're not framing it through the lens of the people part of this, right? They're not understanding that there are humans that are being impacted one way or another. And that is going to dictate whether or not the programs that we're trying to roll out, whether they can or can't be successful. And so I've found it go through this kind of like stage, and this is a journey that I'm seeing. It's maybe different than the one that you're seeing, but you have this state of them just being unaware, right? Like there's just like everyone's clueless. We're making all these changes, like nobody knows what's happening. Then you have this state of resistance where, again, because there's a lack of understanding, right? They went from unaware to like, now I know what's happening, but I don't want this to happen. So now you've got that state of resistance. Then, if you can navigate that well enough, you get them to a place of like curiosity. So now they're curious, okay, well, help me understand, well, what is changing? And, how will this impact my team? Or how will this impact my onboarding? Or, how will this impact my ongoing support? Then, if you do that well, right, you get them to a place where maybe they're adopting these new processes and they understand why and how to embrace it in their business and through the lens of your partnership. And then, lastly, is a state of advocacy, right? So, just like a customer journey would get to a place of advocacy, we hope we want them to get to a place where they can advocate and trust this program. And so if you think about it through this lens, right, there are ways that if you consider the different emotional stages of this journey, ways that we should be leaning in to get ahead of the risk. Because again, when we're moving from this unaware to this maybe educated state of like, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, here's what's happening. Well, now we're going to be faced with resistance if we're not addressing how they're going to feel at the onset of that change. So these are just things to consider, but this is the emotional journey your customers are going through, and you can only get to the next stage if you've addressed the stage that they're in and handled it well. And so we're going to talk a bit about how do we take our customers through this journey effectively and get to a place where our programs can be successful and we've navigated past that place of resistance. But again, like I said, this is emotional because change is emotional to anybody, right? Like I think about any change that's happened to you on your career journey, on your any personal journey you're on. Change is hard. And if it's not meant with intention, it's going to continue to create friction. And that's what we want to mitigate, right? We need to get ahead of that. We also need to just anticipate what those points of friction are so we can design programs that are more thoughtful. Now, this goes back to my point earlier, right? People want change to happen with them, not to them. I cannot stress this enough. I have navigated enough change for plenty of customers, plenty of employees, myself, right? I've experienced change. And the best way for me to do this successfully is to bring folks along for that journey. And so, one of the most successful things that I've done is really just bringing my customers along for this. So, I'm going to tell you a quick story as we kind of break this down, kind of my 3 points here. But a couple years ago, I was introducing some shifts to our customer base that were basically allowing us to handle more things at scale. And so the impetus here was that we had less CSMs, we had to make some changes, right? Many organizations went through some organizational shifts over the past several years, and maybe you had less people on your team. Now, I am not a how do we do more with less kind of gal. I'm like, okay, well, we need to do something different because we have less. So for me, I had designed a new program that I wanted to roll out to our customers. And this was basically going to introduce a whole bunch of new programs for them. So things like community, things like webinar and scaled education programs, a new learning LMS, right? So we were going to be able to introduce all of these new programs. But as a result, maybe they would have changes to or some augmentation to things they would have had in the past. So maybe if they were meeting with their CSM monthly. Maybe you were scaling that back to every other month, but we're not just taking that away, we're changing it, right? We're giving you access to a community. We're giving you access to on-demand webinars and new live webinar content. We're giving you access to, digital trainings and new articles. We're giving you access to office hours and support office hours, right? So there was this idea of like, we're going to add more. It's going to feel different, but we need to bring them along. So as I was designing this program, before I put the wheels in motion and decided to like full court press roll this out to everybody, what I did is I actually interviewed a bunch of our customers. So I sent an email out to like all of our friendlies and I said, hey, listen, I'm working on a big project. It's going to change how we are supporting you and the programs that we've rolled out for customers. Would love to get your feedback before we roll this out. And so I effectively introduced this. I walked them through a bunch of slides for about, I would say we had a good number of customers. We had almost about 50 customers volunteer to be a part of this feedback session. And so I walked them through the changes and I actually had a whole bunch of questions teed up that I would ask them to get their feedback. And I captured all the feedback when I was done with all my interviews. I analyzed that and we went back and we made changes and we rolled it out and it was a huge success. And it was successful because it was for customers designed by customers. And that wasn't lip service. That was me actually being able to say, like, thank you to, and I put these logos of the customers who weighed in with their feedback. And I said, thank you to these customers for helping us design something intentional for you, our customers. So our program really was for customers by customers. I gotta tell you, that changed how my customers viewed the programs because it wasn't internally we were designing something that only satisfied our needs and our changes. It was done intentionally for our customers to receive what they needed to in an augmented way. And that was the purpose. So I share that story because That's a great example of how we were able to pull our customers along with us and again, avoid this change happening to them. So, ways that we identified this, like I said, from the story I just told, is we identified our friendly customers. Now, of course, you can pull in any customers, they don't need to be friendlies, but I wanted somebody who was going to be able to willingly participate in a feedback session. And so I often find that our customers that are a little bit more friendly and are in a better place, maybe getting a bit more value from the partnership, are more inclined to provide that feedback and thoughtful feedback, right? Where it's not critical, it is actually collaborative and thoughtful. And that was really important to us so that we get feedback that we could use. The second thing is that I wanted to present these ideas as like, this is a work in progress. By no means is this our final program. We are expecting you to provide feedback that is going to help us design what is best for our customers. So we never intentionally went out the gate and said, hey, we've already done all the work. Now we just want you to validate it. No, absolutely not. It was here's what we're thinking, and here's how we want to do this. Here's our objective, and here's why. Help us design this so that we can achieve our objectives while delivering the value that you need. And then taking their feedback seriously, right? Because that was something else that's a big part of this. And so going back to number 3 is we had to iterate based on what we heard. This wasn't about like, oh, okay, great, we did this session and we collected the feedback. Feedback is only valuable to you and your customers if you put it to work. I cannot tell you how many times I have personally participated in providing feedback to somebody about their company, about a product, about people, something, only for that feedback to just fall to the wayside, right? Like goes nowhere, nobody does anything with it. And that is the worst thing, right? Because I'll never give you feedback again. You're not putting it to use. You're not putting it to work. You clearly don't care. And that sends a signal to me, right? That my feedback wasn't valuable enough for you to take action on. So don't ask for it if you're not going to do something with it. But we took that feedback super seriously and designed and augmented our program through the lens of our customers. And we actually even called out, hey, here's the feedback we heard. These are the themes of what you all need. And here's how we've integrated that into what we're rolling out. Now, at the end of the day, because this is an emotional journey, it does come down to trust. So if your customers don't trust you, they're not going to follow you, right? They're not going to be bought into what you're doing. If they feel like the self orientation is that you are prioritizing your goals and your objectives over their needs, it's not going to be successful. I don't care what you're trying to do, right? And let me tell you something, your customers are smart and they can sense these things. So if you're building programs that are clearly designed for your best interest, it's not going to get adopted well. So things that I've done here, right, is I bring data. I help my customers understand, hey, listen, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. And here's the information that supports why we think this will be successful or why we're justifying the changes that we're making. The more data you can share, the better. Now, again, this goes back to you having this open dialogue with your customers and being able to be transparent. I see a lot of customers and companies, they just skip over this entirely. We're not getting the context of why these changes are happening. So if you can introduce the why and bring data to support why you're doing these things and why it will benefit them, better likelihood of getting buy-in. Now, something else is this ability to show and tell. I'm big on this as well. I want to be able to provide examples. So this will go into some of the other things that I'll suggest, but if you are able to say, hey, look, we have tried this. We've been working in a pilot program with a couple of our customers. Here's the success that we've had. Here's what's worked. Here's what hasn't. Here's the changes that we've made. If you can introduce examples of what is about to happen along with the impact and give them a sense of what that's going to look like, they can then start to trust it because it's becoming more real for them. That is something else I see skipped all the time. And because we oftentimes go right into design and execution, we skip the step of actually piloting some of this stuff. Now, I'm a big tester. I know that not all of my ideas are good. And so by no means do I plan on rolling any of my ideas out like to all of my customers day one. So I'm going to test it, right? Like, does this feel right? Does this feel good? And listen, for this part, I don't just test with my friendly customers. I want my most critical customers, some of the customers that are the most dissatisfied right now. I want them to also see, listen, we're trying, we want to test something new that might deliver some additional value for you, that might be more helpful, address a concern you had. And so being able to pull them along for the ride actually buys me a little bit more empathy and a little bit more collaboration and honestly helps get things back on track. So if you can go into this with being able to show and tell, right? Show what you're trying to do and the impact of that. Lastly, is try to find some quick wins. You've got to be able to articulate the benefits to your customers, but these can't be long term benefits, right? So it's like, I can't have my customers run a marathon and wait for them to get across that finish line to feel satisfied, right? Like, I don't know if I can get them at the 5K mark and the 10K mark, right? Like, how are you able to help them figure out what some of those wins are that feel really meaningful and beneficial to them? Maybe it's, hey, if you've just brought on new people onto your team and we need to get them ramped really quick, don't worry about you having to onboard them. We've actually created a new program so we can get them up and running and get them trained and enabled on your deployment of the product in 2 sessions or less, right? Like something like that. Immediate impact to them. Try to figure out what those quick wins are and things that they can benefit from through these programs, right? Like, you no longer have to wait to get a roadmap call scheduled with your CSM or your product leader. We're now running these roadmap calls every month and you can join, and they're offered 2 different times, and you can sign up for the time that works for you, and they're on demand and you can go back for the replay, or like whatever the win is for your customers. Get them to understand that, get them bought into it, and then get them on a path where they can actually achieve it. Now, something that we often lose in this ton of digital transformation is this value transfer. Now, it's because, again, when we go back to this idea that your customers definitely feel like they're losing something. That's just a fact. They definitely feel like they're getting less than, they're losing something, they're losing access, they're losing a person that they trusted, they lost a process that they felt comfortable with. They're losing something. How do you help them understand you're not losing something? We're just transferring that value. So it's going to be delivered in a different way. The value is still there. We're just transferring it, right? So instead of getting value like you did one-to-one with your CSM, you're now getting value, but you're actually going to be able to collaborate with customers who look just like you, who have similar objectives, right? So you're getting not only the expertise of your CSM who's leading this session, but you're now also getting to hear really thoughtful questions from other customers who are like you. And this is going to open up new ideas for you and new opportunities for you to learn and see different use cases of our solution, right? You have to be able to articulate the value behind the changes you're making. But so many times we fail to connect that dot. And so the value that they saw in one thing, we're not connecting it to something else. And this is where this mapping this value is really a critical stage in this transformation. You have to be able to help them understand that you're not losing this. It's just being delivered in a different mechanism or a different way or through a different channel, right? Maybe it used to be one-to-one and now it's going to be asynchronous. So now instead of us hopping on a call, I'm going to send you a Loom video and it's going to be the same thing of me explaining it to you. You're just not going to like take up 30 minutes on my calendar, right? You don't need to, I don't need to. There's small little changes there, but this is a stage that I think a lot of people also skip, is that value transfer mapping. So let's talk through my approach to the digital rollout and how I've been able to overcome a lot of the challenges that we sometimes face when we're dealing with these types of changes. So the first thing I always do is I segment our customers into tranches for this rollout. So let me just make it very clear. If you're going through a digital transformation, your approach should not be, we're rolling this out to all of our customers at once. I am telling you from experience, it is better to batch this, to roll it out across different cohorts of your customers. So I build these tranches of customers, and it could be, hey, listen, our first one we're going to start with looks like this, and we're going to roll it out, and here's the timeline. And once we get halfway through that, or we get to a certain milestone with them, wash, rinse, repeat, we're going to go on to the next one. I'm telling you, batching this makes a big difference. I promise you. Try to avoid this entire rollout. The second thing is communicate and then over communicate. There will never, ever, 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 ever be enough communication when you're navigating a change like this. I have seen, again, so many companies, they send out an email, maybe they do a webinar or something, or there's a call, or their CSM maybe tells them something's changing, and that's it, right? And maybe not everybody gets on that call or attends that webinar or reads that email. And now you've missed educating a whole bunch of your customers. I am telling you, your communication campaign, which is what it needs to be very thoughtful, and it needs to continue. It does not stop after you've checked one box or two boxes or even three boxes. You need to keep the communication going. It's going to be heard by different people at different times. People are going to hear what they want to hear. Sometimes they're going to be so resistant to the change, they're not going to be open to hearing anything initially outside of what they want to hear. And so this is so critical. Educate, enable, and repeat. When you're trying to drive change, there is not like this idea of, oh, well, we rolled it out and like that's great and they should all just understand it because we've trained them and like we should be great. I don't know about you, but it takes me like 10 times to learn anything. I have to do things a million times sometimes, right? So you can't assume that because you've said it once, or even if you've said it twice, that that is enough. You also have to consider learning styles, and we're going to talk about that. But this needs to be an ongoing process for a period of time. Now, I'm not saying that this is like, oh gosh, Chrissy just told me I need to keep educating these customers on this program for the rest of eternity. That is not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if this is a new program that you're introducing to customers, especially legacy customers who are used to having something done a certain way for an extended period of time, you have to continue to reiterate and recommunicate and educate and bring them along because it's going to take more than once. They're going to need to hear it a couple times. The next thing that I think is so critical here is your ability to measure the impact. You're making these changes for a reason, which means you need to be able to track, is our objective being met? You have to figure out what those KPIs are. We're going to talk about that. And then lastly, I will say iterate. You're going to have to evolve your program, right? Whatever you design today might look 10 times different in 3 months from now because you're going to learn. You're going to get more feedback from customers. You're going to see things. You're going to learn things. You're going to attend a webinar and something is going to click for you. And you're like, oh, that was a great idea. I need to go back to my program and we're going to change it and we're going to iterate. Iterate. There is no set it and forget it in customer success. There is no set it and forget it in business, right? Everything should always be a constant state of evolution. I think, especially now, we're in this age right now of complete transformation when we think about AI. So everything is changing around us. You need to be flexible and nimble and iterate. So let's take a minute. We're going to dig through each of these, and I kind of want to give you some context. So the first one here, this segment customers into tranches for rollout. This goes back to like my idea that you should not be rolling this out to all of your customers at once. This is one of those things where I usually will say like, strong opinion loosely held. This is like a strong opinion strongly held. I am telling you, please, at all costs, especially if you have lots of customers, if you've got hundreds, thousands of customers, please do not do this all at once. If you have 50 customers, okay, maybe you could twist my arm and convince me that like you could do this at once. But if you've got lots of customers, then that's usually the state in which you're thinking about a digital transformation anyway, because you've got a lot of customers and probably limited resources. That's when you're trying to get to this place and pace of scale. And so you're going to have a lot of customers to manage this with. Please don't roll it out all at once. So the first thing I do is I split my customers into segments to facilitate the rollout. My segment for this rollout does not necessarily map how you segment your customers. Okay, so let me clarify. Maybe in your organization, you have customer segments. Maybe you've segmented your customers by industry or by revenue. Sadly, I still see that. Or it's by stages or something else, right? You've segmented your customers, or maybe it's by like size. Whatever the case may be, your customer segments are not necessarily how you'll want to roll this out. So let me explain. If I have customers right now that are in onboarding, I am not trying to go and make all these changes to them in the midst of them getting up and running on our platform. I'm not trying to introduce something new that early. If I've got customers who are in the midst of maybe a complex renewal or some difficult risk situation, I may not want to be running them through this change at this moment. You need to consider your customers, where they are, what they need, and how will this be received. So for me, I'm very thoughtful about that. We consider a ton of different factors and we put our customers into these tranches and we say, okay, tranche one, this is the rollout timeline, how we're going to do this, what we're looking to hear first. And again, the timeline between the rollout will get smaller and smaller. But the first one we rolled out, I always roll it out and give myself enough time to learn and iterate before I go to the second one. Now, by the second one, right? I'm learning. I've already made a bunch of changes. We're good. By the time I get to my third one, that gap in that timeline significantly reduced, right? Like I can do it maybe a week later, maybe days later, whatever the case may be. But I've learned enough and we've got a machine now. And we get to this place where we can kind of get it going. So think about that. Split your customers up into these segments. Start with customers where there's less business risk. I can't emphasize this enough. I kind of gave you some examples, right? Like if they're in onboarding, if they're in a complex renewal, if they're in a state of risk, if they have already communicated their intention to churn or things like that, like maybe not the best customers to start with. So because you're trying to drive change, you want the change to be successful. If it's introducing more risk into the partnership, you're not going to see the outcome that you anticipated. And what's going to happen there is actually going to send the wrong signals to the program. Because if you start to see, well, we rolled out this program and now all these customers are churning, but what you failed to think about is that all those customers were actually at risk beforehand, and this was the straw. So the program isn't broken. The sequencing of how we decided to roll this out, or the communication, or the intention didn't work in this moment, right? So consider where your customers are in that moment before you're rolling it out. It will also impact your ability to tell an effective story of effectiveness. Lastly, establish tracking and reporting. I can't stress this enough. You have to have these things in place before you roll this out because you need to be watching everything. I am telling you, we had like Bloomberg terminal style dashboards going on when we were rolling this out because we need to understand, was adoption usage changing significantly, right? Were customers submitting more tickets? Were we seeing spikes here or there? There's so many data points to be thinking about and looking at. You have to have that in place beforehand. So that way you have enough visibility, especially if in this transformation, what you're doing is reducing the one-to-one engagement that your customers are having with a member of your team. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Second, communicate over communicate. Design a communication plan with enough lead time. So don't communicate this to your customers and then say, okay, well, today's Thursday. On Monday, we're rolling this all out. No, give your customers enough time. When we were rolling out our program, I started my interviews months before we rolled it out. And I started a communication plan with my customers definitely weeks, probably months before we rolled it out. And then there was more communication, right? So give yourself enough lead time because you don't want this to be like, we're communicating it and then we're making the change right away. Your customers are gonna be panicked, right? You haven't had enough time to let them adjust. Remember, this is an emotional thing. It's a trust thing. You have to give them enough time to process. Facilitate communication across multiple channels. Not everyone consumes information the same way. Do webinars, do one-to-one, do email, do short video, long form video, do on-demand content, do things in a newsletter, have a pop-up in app. Come up with creative ways to deliver the message so that whomever is consuming it can consume it in a way that will resonate with them. Don't just think that because you sent an email that everyone's fine, right? Everyone learns and consumes information in different ways. Give it to them the way they need it, the way they want it, and where they want it. And then track communication engagement, right? Just because you put 30 different messages out there, make sure that all of your customers have interacted or engaged with the content. Okay? What percentage of our customers attended the webinar? Which customers are reading the pop-up that's in app? How many people opened the Loom video? How many people opened the email, right? Like you can track communication engagement, right? It's part of digital marketing. This happens all the time. People are looking at these stats. Track it back to your customers. Make sure that every customer has engaged with your communication plan before it gets rolled out. And if not, you need to be proactive about saying, hey, Mr. Mrs. Customer, I'm so sorry. It looks like you may have missed this, right? You need to be then a bit more proactive about ensuring that's been delivered. Don't just assume that because we blasted everything that, you know what, it's on them. There are certain things where I would say, yes, a little bit of ownership and accountability needs to be on your customers. When you're going through change like this is not the time. Educate, enable, and repeat. Okay, you need to design an education plan, create materials for all learners. This goes back to the same thing with the communication. Short form video, long form video, written stuff, have things in your knowledge base, have, automated emails that go out, have things in your knowledge base that talk about the changes. Make sure that there are links in your CSM signatures about webinars that they can attend, right? Like keep it in their face and make sure that they are enabled and know how to engage with the new model that is being rolled out. Train your customers on changes and then reset expectations. Okay, it's not enough to just talk at them and say, "Hey, these are the things that we're doing. Cool, great. We're all okay." You have to reset their expectations as well. So, for example, if your customers are used to getting certain things from you, maybe in a certain timeline or through a certain way, you have to help ensure that their expectations are in line with the new reality. And sometimes this is just going to take a little more time. And every customer is going to go on their own journey here. So it's going to be important for you to also confirm that their expectations are in line, right? And if their expectations are different, lean into that, have those conversations. But you've got to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And then repeat, repeat, repeat. I cannot stress this enough. It is not one and done, ever. So there's got to be a bit of this that continues to happen. So like I said, when we rolled our thing out, not only did we do it all these places and all these different ways and over this period of time, my CSMs like had links in their thing like, hey, like we did, it was a digital transformation. And so it'd be a link to the pre-recorded webinar that we did that you can go and watch it, right? Like, want to know more about our digital transformation or about our scaled programs or how to participate in community, whatever those things were. We had links in our signature. We would make sure that those things were communicated on our one-to-one calls when we did have them. We just made sure that we were maniacally focused on making sure that all of our customers understood what was happening and were coming along for the ride. Measure the impact. Again, nothing is worth doing if you can't understand if it's successful. So, one, you have to identify what those key milestones are for success tracking. There are going to be milestones along the way that will indicate, is this working or is this not? These are different than KPIs. These are the things that you're going to be looking for. Did this happen? Because if this happened, then we're on track, right? So think about milestones through that lens. For us, it was like, hey, if we went to a scaled onboarding program, did our customers, complete something? Did they do something in the platform that they should be doing that would indicate to us that they are following the content, that they are, understanding what needs to be done and that they're doing the things. Figure out what those milestones are and then track them. Create risk flags and have plans for intervention. So if the milestones aren't happening, uh-oh, what now? Like, you have to have a plan of how your team is going to intervene and what to do and say, right? It's not just like, hey, something looks wrong. You have to understand what the signal is saying and suggesting, and then how do you intervene? Lastly, you need to secure reporting on leading and lagging indicators. Can't stress this enough, right? Your lagging indicators are probably going to be tied to the objectives of why you rolled this out anyway, but you've got to figure out, how do I figure out what are those early signals that, hey, maybe this isn't looking good, or this is landing and this customer is getting a ton of value. Figure out the difference, map those out, make sure you're reporting on these early and often. And then lastly, I know this slide is very compelling. Iterate, iterate, iterate. I can't stress this enough. Keep changing. You're gonna learn. You're gonna learn what works, what doesn't work. You're gonna hear feedback. Put all of your learnings to work for you. This is what's gonna make your programs great. This is what's gonna help your customers be bought in. This is what will ultimately drive success. But if you think that the program that you rolled out day one is gonna be as successful a year from now and no changes made, I am telling you, you're dead wrong. Your product evolves, your customers evolve, the market evolves, everything is changing around us. You need to be flexible. You need to be designing for future states. So that said, I know we're almost at time. I want to land with this. Just remember, transformation starts with trust. It is your job to earn the trust of your customers, to make sure that you're doing the best work that is going to help them be most successful. Your objective is not the primary goal here. It's, can we deliver something that will continue to drive value for our customers in a way that they can be successful? So continue to anchor on trust, build those relationships, keep following the plan, and hopefully this should be a successful rollout with a little less resistance. So I think we've got some time for Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I think my friend Dave is going to join us back, and maybe we'll get to some of the questions that we've got here.
I'm back for better or for worse, but great job, Christy. That was awesome. So thank you, and for everybody that's been engaging with us, thank you so much in the chat. I did see one question come in, Christy, from Holly. So Holly asks, if we already have customers without a CSM, do you have any ways that you've done this via scaled or one-to-many models?
So I think it's just augmenting that, right? A lot of the things that I talked about were how do you communicate through scaled channels and just modifying that. I think it's just follow the same plan with the removal of that one-to-one. Now, I will say though, if you're making significant changes, maybe it makes sense to assign a program leader. In this case, you can call them whatever you want, but have somebody there who can be available to have and facilitate one-to-one communication with these customers, even at a scaled approach, right? And maybe it is inbound questions that are coming in and making somebody available to hop on a call or answer a question. So where you didn't have that one-to-one before, as you're going through this change, making somebody available to address concerns, intervene when there's risk could be really helpful, at least the early stages of this change.
Awesome. Thank you. I think another question that came up is when you start doing these tranches and these segments of moving people from a one-to-one model to a one-to-many model, how do you identify the first cohort? So, for example, I feel like a common mistake somebody might make is to follow the path of least resistance and find your quietest customers, your lowest AR customers, put them in there in tranche one, track it, and say, "Aha, we got it." So, what would you recommend when identifying the right customers for your first tranche? Because it sounds like based on what you said, that's the first one that's going to dictate the rest. So how would you model the first tranche?
Yeah, I'm definitely not starting with my most dormant customers because they're already not engaged, right? They're not going to tell me if the program is successful or not because they're already not participating. So I want customers who are going to be able to come along this journey and actually provide me some feedback. I don't want to cause more risk in the business. So I am looking for customers that are in an engaged state, right? So if they're actively participating in conversations with their CSM right now, if they're engaged in the platform, right? So if you're a SaaS company or a technology company, are they using your product today in a way to help achieve their goals? So I'm actually being more thoughtful of not finding risk customers. I'm not going for the dormant customers. I want the customers who are going to be able to help me understand initially, can this program be successful? Because if you're just testing it with the customers, again, this path of least resistance of like dormant, quiet, small, those aren't even going to be the ones that will benefit. They're going to be not impacted, right? For them, it's like, nothing's changed. They don't interact anyway. So for me, I want to know, is this going to work? Can this work? So I'm actually looking for more engaged customers. So I have my own checklist, but what looks good to me might look different to everybody else. So I'm not going to sit here and rattle off my personal checklist because remember, all of our businesses are different. There is no one size fits all in customer success. So I would just suggest look at your customers, but where can you learn the most without creating a lot of risk to your business? And maybe it's like, hey, listen, we're gonna pick customers who don't renew for 2 years, right? Like we're like, if this doesn't go well today, I'm not going to see material revenue impact tomorrow. So, again, figure out what the criteria is for you and then roll it out that way.
For sure. I think that's fantastic. And I think we have time for one more before we wrap up at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. One last question, I guess, for me is I know we've been talking so much about pushing customers to the digital segment, preparing them for that model. But what about the examples of accounts that went to the digital segment and all of a sudden something changed at those companies, and now it's time for them for maybe to go back into a one-to-one model? How do you approach that? Is it a whole different presentation, or are there similarities that you can draw to move people from one model to the next, depending on the changes that happen at your customer accounts?
So it's interesting. I've kind of addressed this this would actually be an entirely different presentation, but in a short note, I've had customers that grow along the way, right? And so maybe growth dictates how you want to engage and what the partnership looks like as a reflection of that. So let's just say all of a sudden your customer goes through some M&A and now you're supporting the parent company and that small $20,000 account is now a $200,000 account. You're likely not going to leave them in this unsupported customer engagement program where they can only have access to webinars, right? You want to build this, you want to earn trust, build a relationship. I'm going to say at this point, it's a great opportunity for you at whatever that moment in time is that signals to you that now is a good time to lean in and to walk them through that. Now, the interesting thing is here, it's probably not happening to huge amounts of customers at once. So I do think that this can be more tailored. What I used to do in previous companies, and depending on the scale of growth, size, and change, is we would go and look at this every quarter and say, okay, at the end of the quarter, has any customer changed up or down that would dictate that now is a good time for us to change their model? We've seen customers move backwards, right? They go through downsell, they turn off a bunch of products, whatever. Maybe they're not going to get the same white glove experience that they did previously. I've got now customers who've grown. They deserve a different level of engagement. Those changes, you can figure out what the appropriate cadence is. If it's happening to a lot, maybe you figure out quarterly feels appropriate, every 6 months, whatever the number is, or it can be one off depending on the scale.
Love it. Love it. Well, that was perfect timing. We are at the hour mark. So, Christy, thank you so much for being here today. And everybody who joined us, thank you all for joining us at this virtual summit. We are going to wrap up now because this is the end of the session. For those of you that are here, this recording of this session will be available in Maddox Resource Hub beginning next week. And then all folks who have registered for the summit will get an email letting them know where to access it. So, Christy, thank you again. Everybody on the call listening in, thank you all for being here. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Talk to you
Thanks
soon.
so much.
Bye now.